Good morning. I'm calling this meeting to order. The time is 8:34 a.m. in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. This meeting is officially open with a quorum present. At this time, I will call the public hearing to order on the Project Redeemer Reinvestment Zone number 001. Dr. Ramsey, I will now turn it over to you, ma'am.
What's beautiful about being here is that we're already all set up. So I'm going to turn it right over to staff.
Madam President, members of the board, this is the first public hearing of two, I think, with respect to that. It's the second one on the agreement. With respect to the application of Hanwha Q-Cells America for an application for a 313 agreement. We're getting down to the end. Chapter 313 expires at the end of December. So they're trying to get one under the wire, which they've done. They've got it through the controller's office. The reinvestment zone is a requirement of the Texas Constitution. Under Article 8, Section 6 of the Texas Constitution, Article 8, Section 1G, the Texas Constitution, local political subdivisions are authorized to enter into economic development agreements under that, which is favorable tax treatment. It gets around the equal and uniform taxation provision elsewhere in Article 8, Section 1. And but in order to enter into one of those agreements, it has to be in what they call a reinvestment zone. The reinvestment zone is a geographic area described by resolution adopted by the Board of Trustees or a county commissioner's court that authorizes the creation or the ultimate execution of a tax abatement or a tax limitation agreement. It is enabling. It doesn't have any direct effect on any other taxpayer. The statute, the board is given the authority under 312.0025 of the Texas Tax Code to adopt reinvestment zones. It's interestingly, you can adopt one for your own 313. You can use the counties, but no other political subdivision can use one created by the school district. It's just how they drafted statutes at different times. That's what they did in terms of the legislature. So before you today is a resolution. The public hearing, there will be a resolution presented for the creation of a reinvestment zone in an area that has been designated by Hanwha as one of their targets. FYI, they have two applications going on right now, one for here, and it's interesting that it's a pretty big piece of property. It's kind of why this has happened. You guys are doing one in conjunction with Alito because the piece of property is in both school districts. They have a similar situation in Dallas County, Dallas ISD, and Lancaster ISD. So they have the same kind of deal because the property laps over. Dallas tabled theirs yesterday, so you guys, that you might be out there by yourselves in terms of that, depending on how the board acts, that they decided not to go forward for whatever reason. So that's what's up tonight. In Parker County, the county created one. That's why the Alito didn't have to, because the county created a reinvestment zone for their half of that, which they can use for purposes of the adoption of that. So the statute requires that we publish a newspaper notice, which we've done. Statute requires that we notify all the other taxing entities and give them copies of the draft, which we've done. We have gotten no feedback with respect to that. almost never do because, as I said, there's virtually no impact of the creation of one of these on any taxpayer or any other taxing entity. It's just an enabling provision. So that's pretty much it. Be happy to answer any questions.
Board, any questions? At this time, do we have a need to go into executive session, or would we call for a vote?
I see no reason to, I would think we need to close the public hearing.
We will do that, and then the question is from there.
We actually have 2 hearings, so
Okay,
you conclude this one?
just want to make sure. At this time, we will close this public hearing, and we'll move on to public hearing on the application of Hanwha Q Cells Americas Holding Corporation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ramsey. Again, if you would introduce the presenters.
We'll just continue with council, and if you have any questions for either council or for our internal counsel after the public hearing.
All right. This is a public hearing on the application and the agreement with respect to Hanwha Q Cells application for a 313 investment. It is easier probably to discuss these in the context of the spreadsheet that we're passing out because the agreement is, the draft agreement is designed to produce that financial result that's in the spreadsheet. Under Chapter 313 of the Texas Tax Code, school districts are authorized to enter into tax limitation agreements with corporations that meet certain requirements that for eligibility under the statute. In this case, the requirement is being met is manufacturing corporations entered into that are engaged in manufacturing under the SIC code system are authorized to apply for Chapter 313 agreements. In the value that you can drop the limitation to is set by law. In the law is basically kind of scaled in terms of the limitation amount. It's scaled by your tax base in the district. Fort Worth's got a significant tax base, so the limitation amount is $100 million. So you can cap their taxable values at $100 million if you enter into one of these agreements, and they're asking you to do so. The agreement, the statute authorizes us to enter into an agreement, which is a fairly lengthy document designed to protect the district's interest with respect to the decision that you make over a period of time, approximately 15 years, during which we know that the Texas legislature is going to make significant changes in the school finance system because they always do every 2 years. The way we try and protect your interest, or the way we don't try, we do protect your interest in terms of these drafted agreements, is that we never try and predict what the Texas legislature is going to do. That's kind of a fool's errand with respect to that. So what we literally do is that we calculate the impact that the granting of a limitation amount has on school district revenues for each year of the agreement in which it's in effect. We do that by basically making a school finance calculation on each the then existing law for each school year during which the limitation is in effect, of what the amount of money that you would have kept, net of recapture and all the net of all the state aid system, under the assumption that the plant got built and you did not grant the agreement. Yeah, to kind of say that's the base case. Just say we don't grant an agreement, then we make that, and we do that using, although there's a printout in front of you, we're going to use that. We're going to, for each year of the agreement, this is a model. For each year of the agreement, we're going to use actual ADA, actual values, actual tax rates that you set, and all of the variables for each of the years for which we make the calculation. So this is a model. It's kind of static. The reason why it's static, we find that it's easier to explain how the agreement works with a static model. If we had inflation in, or if we had student growth in it, or various other kinds of things, it would obscure kind of the basics of it. So, although those will be taken into effect with respect to this over in the actual words on the paper and the algebra that we do. So then the second calculation, we do the base case, we do the second calculation. The only difference is we use all the same numbers all the way through. The only thing we do is we apply the $100 million for the value of this property that for which you've granted the limitation, instead of the value that's placed on it by the Tarrant County Appraisal District. All right, that will give you essentially the delta of what this cost you, if it costs you anything in a school year. So that we do that for every year of the agreement. If you're short, if it costs you anything, then the company has to pay it, has to reimburse you for that cost. All right, that's basically how. So doing that, we're not trying to predict the legislature. We're measuring the effect of your decision and compensating you for any adverse consequence associated with that. The company's agreed to that. In addition to that, the company has agreed to. Well, let me go through the numbers. By the way, if you look at the spreadsheet, column G is a result of those projection on those calculations for the values that are on the books. We have made one concession to them. The company has requested, because they were trying to get a little better deal and all this other stuff. By the way, we did not, the deal's the same for everybody. Yours and Alito's is the same. We're not doing throat cutting contests or anything of that nature. So the deals are the same. The company wanted a little bit bigger benefit well, let me go to column I for a second. We agreed, in addition to the amount of the whole harmless amount, there's a supplemental payment. Supplemental payment cap is $100 per ADA times the ADA in the district, which for Fort Worth is a lot of money because you guys got a lot of ADA. Lalito's considerably less and all that. They requested and we agreed to an alternate cap of 20% of the net benefit, and that 20% of the net benefit is in column I. Okay, so that's $14 million over the life of this agreement that Fort Worth ISD is going to get. Now let me go back to column G for a second. Column G is that as a result of the calculations and in accordance with one provision, which is 48.256 D of the Texas Education Code, there's a provision put in there by the speaker in 2019 when they went from prior year values to current year values. They created an alternate calculation of loss that was a bit artificial. It was to compensate for certain districts for the amount of money that you lost when they had prior year values. and you put values on the rolls, the state didn't know they were there for the first year. You got to tax that. It was called, we used to call it living large on the lag. There was a lag between state values that they ran the state system off and local values. The local values were, state values were local values from the prior year. What that means is when your tax base was growing, you had a little bit of extra money in the kitty because you were taxing values that were a little bit in excess of what they were running their system on. They took that away in 2019 so that they could compress your tax rate. That basically they needed money in order to fund the governor's initiative to push down the tax rate. They actually went from prior year values to current year values, which netted the state a significant savings, and then they turned around and used that to lower the local taxes. That's how they paid for that in 2019. Well, that cost 313 people a bunch of money. The speaker had a bunch of them in his district, so he put this extra provision in. And that calculation results in, it's defined as a loss because it's called a loss in 256D, but it's not a loss to y'all, it's a kind of an opportunity cost. So it's a benefit to the district. In this case, in column G, if you look at 26, 27, which is VL1 through VL4, you see multiple $1 million worth of losses. That is that calculation financed over 4 years. All right. So that's called a loss to that, but it's actually extra money to Fort Worth ISD because it's a defined loss, not an actual reduction in state revenues. So that totals over the period $11 million. At the end of the day, Fort Worth ISD picks up 25. If they build this, 25, almost $26 million over the term of this. We've been doing these since 2002. We did the very first one in these. We've had a lot of experience with these, and nobody's lost any money. You can do these with some confidence. There's a couple of reasons. One is that we have a fairly lengthy agreement that's been well worked out now over the years with respect to the mechanics of this. It's lengthy because writing algebra into English it's not an easy task. So make your fifth grade remember your word problems from when you're in fifth grade. But they've gone through and they kind of immune from bankruptcy, if you will, or immune from various things for two reasons. Well, it's in this kind of an installation. One is there's an obligation under state law, which we've carried through in this agreement, but it's in state law anyway, that the district, that the company maintain a viable presence in the district for a period of 5 years after the last year of the tax break. So that's a 15-year period. If they fail to do so, they forfeit 100% of the benefit, the net benefit they got, the net benefit being the amount of money, their savings less what they paid us. They forfeit 100% of the net benefit, plus they forfeit what would be, it's calculated the same way that taxes are calculated. We get penalty and interest on that, dating back to the date of the savings of each one of those amounts. We kind of added the penalty and interest stuff, and it's been basically in every agreement. That's actually been picked up in the controller's form. So there's a huge consequence to that. Now, given the size of the investment, if they make the investment, there is and we have what amounts to a tax lien on the property in order to enforce that. So we have tangible property that we can levy against in the event that there was a default. So we're comfortable on that. If there's we've been through, not these guys, it's a big company, but we've been through bankruptcies and various stuff in Chicago and Delaware and various things on some of these agreements. And they always come out in the end, because when you have a major asset, however they exit bankruptcies, that asset has value that somebody's they're either going to continue it, or if they do a debtor in possession, or they're going to liquidate it, somebody's going to buy it and try and operate it. The buyer, in either case, the new operator is going to want the tax break that's represented by the agreement, and in order to get the tax rate, they got to pay us. So otherwise they default on it. The bankruptcy will keep you from declaring a default on it while it's pending. So so sometimes it may delay you getting paid, but when they exit bankruptcy, then you get 100% of your money. This is this government's treated like a priority claim in bankruptcy, so we're comfortable over there. We've been battle tested with that in those agreements. So we're comfortable that you will be protected with respect to the entry of the agreement. I will say that this is in our discussions with the company, this is what they call a phase one. They have intentions of wherever they locate of expanding it sometime in the reasonably near future, which is within the next 7-8 years, and then double or triple the capacity. So the one that gets landed is significant. The issue to me is, from our discussions, will be access to rail. It's one of the keys on this, is that the solar panels are big. They get stuffed into containers and shipped all over the place on those. So they want access to container facilities so that they can ship the product to market. Questions?
Trustee Evans.
Thank you so much for all this information. It's kind of a lot to take in. I just want to make sure I have it in order. So I have a few questions. First, what is the nature of the widget or product that they're manufacturing? You mentioned solar panels. Is it A to Z, or are they just manufacturing a component of the solar panels?
This is an interesting, I've never seen this before. This is A to Z.
Okay.
They're starting with the first thing is a wafer plant, where they're going to, well actually, yeah, they make silicon tubes, and then they slice them with cutters and polish them. They make wafers. The next step is they photomask them and put chips on them. The next phase is they test them and put them in racks, basically, and the last one is they put them in, put the faces on them and all that. So this is soup to nuts. This installation is each of those phases all together.
And then regarding these base calculations, thank you. This was extremely helpful. The total, though, for the column C versus column J, the difference is significant. And I heard you talk about opportunity cost, but so is the presumption that without this 313 agreement being approved, they would never initiate a plant here in Tarrant County?
Here in Texas.
Okay. And then lastly, regarding the bankruptcy, would we be the primary lien holder if they default, or are we just in line with a whole other bunch of people?
We would have a priority claim in bankruptcy, just like taxes.
Okay.
It's that nobody quite not wants to know what to do with the the penalty on the taxes, but it's been treated every place we've been as a priority claim, like a tax claim. You're not absolutely first if there's a mortgage holder, but corporations don't put mortgages on these deals, so if there was a direct financing to build it, then we'd be secondary to them, but that would be pretty much it.
But any sort of subsequent debt the corporation takes on for operating purposes is secondary, would be secondary to our lien?
Yeah, we'd be in the first group that's covered.
Okay, thank you so much.
Trustee Dr. Camille Rodriguez.
Yeah, what is the location of this proposed?
It is, I'll have to get the highway numbers. It's on the boundary between, because part of it's in Parker County, between, let me get the application. The highways. It is south of, let's see if I can make, it's south of 20. It straddles the line. It is off of Aledo Iona Road, if that does anything for you. I have a map here if that does you any good.
Yeah, I just. And how many acres are Fourth ISD?
The acre, I'm not sure. The acres in Fort Worth ISD are, it's about 1,200 overall, but the allocation between Parker and, this is a better one. That's also known, the property is also known as Walsh Ranch. This is the same location that Rivian was flirting here about a possibility. They ended up putting it in Georgia, but this is the exact same location that Rivian was looking at
Okay.
when they were looking at a site for a plant.
Okay, and in processing these solar panels or whatever, are there any hazardous materials? And will they clean it, or, because I don't want to find
Oh,
out
yeah,
20
there-
years
there-
later that it's carcinogenic or something, and,
There are some that in terms of the chip making process, but the TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, is pretty rigorous in terms of their water standards for discharge. So the materials that they basically, the most toxic, if you will, part of it is cleaning once they do the photomasking and they lay down the wires, if you will, which they do with a electrolysis process, then they clean it, and it's the solutions they use to wash the equipment. Now, in order to do this, by the way, they spend a lot of money on water purification because the water has to be what they call ultra pure before they use it to do the washing. So they recycle that. But so it is not none, but the nature of the process and the fact that they have to have the certain water purity for that, they have the equipment in the house to do that before they discharge it.
okay, and when is the anticipated completion date for these buildings? And
If you look at the chart, this is the school law, this is tax code, or tax years and school years, and so there, you need a little conversion lesson. We use school years because, on our stuff, because it is not, because that's what people are used to. And so if you look at that, the 26-27 school year they're going to have $1 billion. 25, 26, they're planning on $582 million. That's when they're under construction. But when you convert that, what that means is, because the values are based on tax years. So when I take the 25, 26 school year, that's tax year 2025. Tax year 20, in order to be on tax year 2025, that is value that's in place on January 1st of that year, not the last day of the year. So in order to get $582 million for the 25, 26, that means that construction would have had to take place during 2020, calendar 2024. Okay, and then it looks like they're given the values, they're going to mostly complete it during 25. They go up just a little bit in the following year, but it pretty much, it's between 25 and 26.
Okay.
Because of the other cue on this is that the companies, in terms of, obviously construction stuff can slip and all that, and supply chains, but they are targeting the value limitation period as beginning on the 26, 27 year. What that means is that when they target these, that they try and hit the highest values so that they get the biggest benefit from these. The highest value, biggest benefit is the first year in the plant's in operation. So they think because they got they're asking for VL1 in 26, 27, that plant will be operational sometime probably in late 25.
Okay.
Okay, that looks like, but what their plan is, given that, because that's a. One other thing, this is an executory, what lawyers call an executory contract. An executory contract is a contract that you sign, you make a deal, but that the company can only take advantage of that by performance. So the performance in this case that's required is the completion of the project and the creation of the jobs and all of that. They don't get the deal until they have completed the contract. So you're not risking getting stiffed, if you will, by somebody makes a deal, you promise them all this stuff, you give them a tax break, and then they bail out. So they actually have to start it, and they actually have to stay 15 years after they start under the statutory scheme. So we're pretty comfortable that you won't get kind of taken to the cleaners with respect to one of these deals.
Okay. And how many potential employees do they plan on hiring from?
How many?
Potential employees.
All right, there's their application says 500. That's there's a reason for that, because the sanction, there are fairly significant sanctions if they don't hit the employment, they lose the deal for the year, and they only have to have the 25 in order to qualify. The whisper, they think it's 2,000.
Okay.
Although their application says 500.
Just so they don't lose.
So they don't get
Right.
don't get hit, but they think that on full operations they'll be employing about.
Okay, and in column G, why is there the 4 years that it has 0?
Okay, because column G is 0 because they are paying us out of the deal these work is they're paying us out of their benefit. All right? So basically what we're doing is we're getting a percentage of the tax benefit that they get as they earn it. And if you look at that, if you look across the qualifying time period, the limitation doesn't kick in. They get no benefit, and so they make no payments to us on that. Now, they do, if you look at QTP2, which is 2526, you'll notice that, and again, this is a projection, your Tarrant County Appraisal District's going to decide what that value of the property is worth. But they're projecting it at $582 million. They will pay taxes on that because the limitation hasn't kicked in. So they'll be paying taxes to Fort Worth ISD as a result of that. But the way that the Texas school finance system works, the state's going to vacuum up most of that tax payment by reducing your state aid in terms of that. So it's if we had the old lag that I was talking about, you'd have gotten the benefit of that for a year, but they took that back. So the state's going to, they are paying taxes in each one of those years on those amounts, but they get no benefit from this deal. They don't get that until the limitation kicks in.
Okay, and final question, but bottom line, how much are they saving and how much are they paying to Fort ISD and over how many years?
Okay, so if you look at columns the J and K. J is the total payments anticipated to the districts, which is $25,899. Potential benefit to the taxpayer is K, which is $58 million, and that works out at 30% to the district, 30.7, and 69.3 to the company. So there's a market for kind of how these things work in terms of, all of these agreements are online. So, and all these corporations look at each other. We don't have a solar panel installation, so there was no model, okay, to look at. We have been in the last year negotiating with TI in Sherman and with Samsung and Taylor and Maynard and a bunch of those. We did, and with Micron Technologies, which we lost in New York. Those are the most competitive kinds of plants in terms of what these kinds of things. And the school districts were netting about 14% of the total savings in those. The other end of the spectrum are refineries, okay, which are considerably less desirable, more tied to certain places because they have to have access to pipelines and shipping and things of that nature. And school districts get on those somewhere about 40 to 50% of the net benefit of those. This one we kind of priced in the middle in terms of that because it's not pure chip making. If it had been more chip making, we'd have probably had to push it a little harder. But it wasn't. So the logic of that was to try and kind of hit in the middle of those in terms of how we priced our benefit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I just had a few questions. You mentioned Delaware and Chicago and when something fell through. My question would be with regard to taxing entities when we are in line for recovery of any funds. Would that include us in a lump with the county, the ISD, and the city? And this is in two different counties, Parker and Tarrant. So how would that work?
In the bankruptcy? Normally, normally you file your own claim. We would file our own claim. We would actually file two claims in the bankruptcy. One would be the back taxes, if they're in, because these guys pay taxes even with this agreement. They pay taxes on the $100 million. They also pay taxes on 100% of their valuation for purposes of debt services. So that if they're in bankruptcy, they're going to be, there's going to be probably a tax claim at some point in the bankruptcy process. Separately, we would file a claim for for the damages basically as a result of the default of the agreement. So they're both, taxes are well established in terms of what their priorities are. But everybody kind of scratches their heads under these 313 agreements because they're kind of novel in bankruptcy court in Delaware. But we've always managed to get placed with that obligation as the same as the taxes. Literally, we have our own claim and we would argue priorities and all that. The way it has tended to work out on these, when you have multiple districts, be it the debtor in possession or whoever's the buyer tends to negotiate all of the taxing entities in one deal. Together. They'll lump them all. So everybody's got their own representation, but they kind of typically get handled together.
Okay, thank you. And then in follow-up to Trustee Rodriguez's question with regard to number of employees, you said it would be listed as 500. However, it could go up to 2,000. My concern would be when we're doing this, what is the benefit to our students and to our district with regard to jobs for our students and for training and for externships, preceptorships? Has that been discussed? Because it was discussed in prior 313s.
It was discussed with the company in this, so they're willing to set up an internship program in terms of what's out there. This is, they're going to have workforce needs, quite frankly, in terms of that. So they're going to be interested in partnering with both us and everybody else they can find in order to help them train techs for this. So they've said they've done that in other places where they are, and they'll be happy to discuss that with us.
Okay, and of course, it wouldn't just be techs, but it would be opportunities for students to go on and become engineers and into leading professional fields
yeah.
as well. But that is not in writing. That is just something they have stated they would be interested in, and we are assuming they will need a workforce, or do we have something in writing?
We do not have anything in writing. We have some email correspondence back and forth, but well, I guess that's in writing, but it's not a part of the agreement.
Mr. O'Hanlon, in your opinion, you believe this will be beneficial to our students?
Yes, I believe it'll be beneficial to our students in a number of ways. One, we will have about $25 million more in extra money in excess of the school finance system that can be expended by the Board of Trustees if for any lawful purpose, presumably to augment their educational experiences. That's money they wouldn't have had otherwise. Second, the extra value, both from this and any follow-on, will either reduce, at your discretion, reduce the existing debt service taxes or create the opportunity for additional bond funding should you decide to put that to the voters, because the addition of that value makes a difference in terms of what the taxpayers pay in debt service. Remember, there's no deduction on the taxes, so that's a benefit. With respect to the number of jobs, given the location of this facility and where it is going to be somewhat transformative for that quadrant of both this district, kind of the western quadrant of Fort Worth ISD, as well as clearly the eastern part of Aledo ISD. So it will significantly enhance development and kind of economic activity across the board. In addition to that, given what I know about the Metroplex, I grew up in Dallas, so I know a little bit about it, that traffic being what it is, commute times, people are going to want to be reasonably close to their point of work. My dad commuted from Dallas to Fort Worth for 20 years when he got transferred from his federal government. He worked for the federal government. His office got moved to Fort Worth. The commute time is reducing that will also tend towards the development of this district, in my opinion. So you get that. I think, given the need for employees in this, there will be significant job opportunities for at all levels of their workforce, from the line production workers, which and all of the districts have to pay all of the employees in the district have to. The employer has to pay the average manufacturing wage for Tarrant County for the qualifying jobs, and the average county wage for all jobs. So that's significant in Tarrant County right now, and it's going up, and so it's going to create significant, pretty good job employment situation for the folks for the moms and dads that are out there, or your graduates in terms of pursuing careers. So yeah, I think in many areas it does that. The other thing that I think this does, it creates a new industry. This is an answer to one of the kind of I guess the oil and gas people's concern about 313s and renewables is that it doesn't create many jobs, all right, in terms of that. So that's one of the objections, and this is the answer to that. This is one step upstream, obviously, from a solar installation, but it certainly creates it's renewable industry, and it does create a lot of jobs. So it's an expanding. We're a huge state for renewables. We have lots of solar projects going on right now. It'd be really good to be making the stuff here rather than doing supply chain issues from China and all that other. So works on that level. It also, these guys are one of the biggest solar manufacturing, so it also was going to tend to put us on the kind of the cutting edge of solar development, how to make these things and make them more efficient. So I suspect that it's also going to create some opportunities for universities and research facilities to support the development of the industry. So this is a new one. We don't do this in the United States. Recall that in 2009, under the American Recovery Act, the Obama administration tried to do this with Solyndra, and it crashed and burned. So it's back. The solar manufacturing in the United States might be back, and that'd be a really good thing.
And I have one final question, a follow-up to Dr. Rodriguez. She spoke about the concern of environmental waste, toxicity, and possibly carcinogenic materials. You answered that fully. My question would be, are they capped on the year of entry when this 313 is approved to the environmental rules at that time, or as those rules and laws change, will they have to comply? This is a tax agreement only between us and them. That we have no ability to impact their environmental compliance requirements in any way. This agreement does not bind any other governmental entity with respect to the imposition of requirements on them at all. And from their purposes, from TCEQ's or the EPA's purposes, that this is invisible to them. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I don't see any. I want to thank everybody. Trustee Phillips, sure.
Thank you, President Jackson. So you said that it was similarly on the table for Dallas ISD and Lancaster ISD.
Yes.
Okay, and what were their reasonings behind not moving forward?
Dallas just simply tabled it. I don't know.
No, I didn't have any public discussion about as far as why they were deciding against.
They simply tabled it.
Okay.
Lancaster isn't up yet. Lancaster's set for their consideration on the 21st.
Okay. And then of course, throughout the conversation, it seems like we've minimized risk, according to the answers and everything you've given. But what is the risk to moving forward with this? So I understand we've minimized many of them, but is there anything that we need to be on the lookout for? And I guess I put that in the context as well of what Dr. Rodriguez said, not looking up 10 years from now and feeling like, oh yeah, we didn't see that coming, or understood that it was something possible, but we were just willing to move forward in spite of type deal. So what are any of the risks that we would be incurring here by moving forward?
Well, there's risks and there's entities designed to mitigate the risks. For example, there is this is a large-scale construction project. I'm fully confident in the Tarrant counties and the city's ability to handle the industrial projects of this size. They've done it before. This isn't a scale problem for them. A little less sure with respect to Parker County on that, but a big chunk of this is in Tarrant County. So obviously what that does to the infrastructure and that kind of stuff is something that needs to be considered. But I've dealt with both the city and the county before and on these kinds of projects, and that fully capable of handling that. That's one kind of issue. The environmental is another. Water quality, Texas is a little lax, probably in respect to some states on air quality standards, not so with respect to water quality standards. The nature of the enterprise, and quite frankly, the cost of water in Texas these days, and it's going to go higher, is going to require a significant amount of recycling on their part because it's economically feasible as well as regulatorily required. And TCEQs, I'm comfortable, like I said, less so with respect to air quality monitoring, but not so with respect to water. They do a good job on that. With respect to air quality, there's not much. There's not an issue with respect to that. They're not refining. They're not doing anything of that nature. So that's the environmental stuff. The financial stuff for us, we've covered in terms of what's out there. The penalty provisions are more than adequate for us to recover, and certainly a significant deterrent on their failure to comply with the requirements in that. So I think we have sufficient protections in that regard, and they've, like I said, been battle tested in bankruptcy court and places, so I'm comfortable in terms of that. There's obviously but as with any manufacturing, I suppose that there's always a risk that especially on cutting edge technology kind of stuff, that the next cutting edge is going to come down the pipe and make this obsolescent in terms of that. I don't think and that's a consideration. There's lots of competitors out there, if you will, in terms of greening of our environment. Everybody's starting to look at green hydrogen right now. They're looking at various things of that nature. Solar is, in this state at least, in my experience, is probably significantly preferable to wind power generation simply because they're not so big. The wind power things are, they're just stark and people don't like looking at them. So there's been a significant amount of resistance to that, but not so much with respect to solar. Solar uses a lot more land, but land prices in Texas relatively are reasonable for these kinds of installations, especially out in vast areas of West Texas where there isn't much water and not much agricultural going on. So there's always a risk whenever you do kind of cutting edge technology to do that, but given this is about a 20-year deal if you count the construction part, I don't think we're going to have moved on from solar in the next 20 years in the life cycle of this. I was reading stuff about fusion. That we just did an interesting fusion thing a couple of weeks ago that has a profit. It could be a game changer, but it's going to be 30, 40, 50 years before they figure out how to commercially develop that. So I think that's a risk that we've got to think about. But I think, again, because the viable presence requirement that we talked about, the 15 years, and because of kind of the cycles with respect to how technology is adopted and dispersed, then I think we're comfortable. And then, quite frankly, is given where we are on green energy standards, electrical generation is by means other than burning hydrocarbons seems to be where national policy is going, well, world policy is going with respect to that. And this is kind of riding that wave a little bit, so it seems a pretty good bet.
And then as far as today, so we have 3 action items today. Okay, so what exactly are we voting on? We vote for these 3 action items so we can get that. And then is there any future board action from there that is needed once we have completed what we do today?
Today is, if it is approved, the 3 board actions are, one is to approve the reinvestment zone, which is what I said earlier, that it is an enabling provision. The second is that Chapter 313 requires, prior to the adoption of the agreement, that you make a series of findings. The findings are supported by the review that we have done, as well as the Controller's Office, and their issuance of a certificate. The certificate basically says, as does the findings, there's 20 findings that basically say this, in a series of steps, this project meets the requirements of a 313 agreement. It's a qualifying investment. It creates a number of jobs. They've signed on for the employment, the requisite number of employees, which they have. They pay the requisite amount of wages. They are a tax-paying, they pay franchise tax, and they're in good standing with the Controller's Office for purposes of that. So they are eligible. That's what the findings are. And then it's in the best interest of the state and the district to do this. By the way, the state has its own. Why is the state doing this? Why are they being generous? Well, they're getting their piece of it too. Part of the analysis that they do in the certificate is the state has a requirement that it has to get all of the money that it gives away in the subsidy by essentially foregoing the local district revenues, or allowing you to do that. They have to get back in 25 years. They have a model in the Controller's Office that they won't show anybody. It's proprietary, but they do an economic study, and often their own internal econometric model, and have made a determination that given their sources of revenues, which is the remaining extra money that we get on this, what we get, what all the other taxing entities get, what the sales tax that's generated on this are over the period of time, that the state gets its money out as well. So that's what the findings are. And then the last thing is to approve the agreement itself.
And the agreement itself being basically what's summarized on this page.
That's the agreement.
Financially,
Yes.
Right. Gotcha. Thank you, President Jackson.
Thank you. Trustee Dr. Michael Ryan.
Well, this isn't to council, but to administration with, if we approve this, where it's going in, south of Alito Road is all the Veal Ranch development. Are we going to be prepared to build the infrastructure that we need? It's going to take at least 3 more elementary schools, and with that will overwhelm Benbrook Middle High School, so we're still going to need to separate the middle school and the high school and be prepared to do that in the next 3 to 7 years.
As we move forward with a master facilities plan, we're going to have a full demographic study, and it's really important that we get ahead and have a full 10-year plan for all facilities in the school district, knowing already that there's additional growth in that area of our school district. The demographer will definitely be looking at that.
Thank you.
Would we call that good trouble? Yes, it does. Well, that's what and we'll see. I don't have any experience specifically because we don't have any manufacturing in the United States with respect to solar panels, but in the chip industry, for Samsung and those guys, NXP and the ones that are making chips, used to be Motorola. For every employee that they have, there's at least another employee that is pretty much almost directly employed there because they work for contractors that work on the site. With the growth we've got, it's going to be $250 million for elementary. Yes, it is. So so it's the combination of that. You kind of, it's managing it, because this is going to develop. If that happens, you get that many jobs, you're going to have a bunch of new rooftops. But you got to build the schools kind of ahead of that. So it's managing that. Eventually, the rooftops and the commercial development, the shopping centers and that strip malls and that kind of stuff end up being probably a net benefit over the time, but you got to figure out how to finance it while you're in the growth stage. That is always a challenge.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Then at this time, which is 9:37 a.m., the date is Friday, December 16th, 2022. This board will now recess and reconvene for executive session as authorized by Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code.
We should close the hearing and then.
I guess I should.
We
Look
have
at the
a
script.
section for public comment as well, just for us to note if we don't have anything.
Okay, we do not have any public comment here. Thank you, everyone. This public hearing is now closed. There is no public comment, and there are no attendees that have asked for public comment. The time is now 9:38 a.m. The date is Friday, December 16th, 2022. We will now recess and reconvene for executive session as authorized by Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code under Chapters 551, 071, 2, 4, and 6. In accordance with the open meetings law, the board opened this meeting at 8:34 a.m. with a quorum present, recessed and reconvened open session, adjourned regular session, convened executive session, adjourned executive session, and now reconvened open session at 9:54 a.m. with a quorum present. We'll move to number 8 on our agenda, action agenda items. Adopt a resolution creating Project Redeemer Reinvestment Zone number 001. I move to approve the resolution creating Project Redeemer Reinvestment Zone number 001. Do I have a second? Second by Trustee Ryan. Do I have any discussion? Seeing and hearing none from the 5 attendees here, we will vote. And the motion passes. Please let the record reflect that we have present Dr. Michael Ryan, Trustee Roxanne Martinez, Trustee Quentin Phillips, First Vice President, Board Secretary C.J. Evans, and myself, Toby Jackson. Moving to B, consider and adopt findings on the application of Hanwha Q Cells Americas Holding Corporation Comptroller Application Number 2087 for an appraised value limitation on qualified property. I move to adopt findings as proposed by the district's consultants and counsel on the application of Hanwha Q Cells Americas Holding Corporation for an appraised value limitation on qualified property. Trustee Evans, do I have a second from you? Thank you. Any questions? Seeing and hearing none, please move to voting. And the motion passes unanimously with the same 5 stated earlier voting. Moving to C, consider and approve agreement with Hanwha Q Cells Americas Holding Corporation Comptroller Application Number 2087 for an appraised value limitation on qualified property. I move to approve application number 2087 and the agreement with Hanwha Q Cells Americas Holding Corporation for an appraised value limitation on qualified property. Do I have a second? I have a second from Trustee Ryan. Do we have any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please move to voting. And the motion passes unanimously. Time is now 9:56 a.m. and this meeting is adjourned.